All right, guys, welcome back. This week we're working through chapter 13, which is on forensic entomology. It's one of probably my favorite sections because we're looking at the bugs that help people solve crimes and figure out how long bodies have been there, etc. This PowerPoint shouldn't be too long. I believe it's only 13 slides, so we should get through it fairly quickly. And then there are questions that go along with the chapter that you'll need to answer. So hopefully you find this helpful. All right, so taxonomy, that's the classification of things in an orderly way. So if you took biology, you probably remember kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, right? When I teach it, I tell the kids they can remember that by remembering King Philip came over for good spaghetti. And when we look at forensic entomology, we're interested in the phylum Arthropoda, the class Insecta, and then these two orders. So we have Diptera, which are flies, okay, and we have Coleoptera, which are beetles. So entomology is the study of insects. Forensic entomology involves the use of insects and other arthropods to aid in legal investigations. So there are three areas of application. We have insect damage to structures, infestation of food and foodstuffs, and then insects that inhabit human remains. Now, insects that inhabit human remains are probably the most popular form, and this is the one that we're going to mainly focus on. All right, so the process of death. So initial or fresh decay. The cadaver is going to appear fresh externally, but inside it's starting to decompose. So bacteria that were present before death that helped out with digestion and everything else going on in your body, once you die, they're going to start eating you. Once that happens, we're going to start having putrefaction and bloating. So that initial stage is usually about 0 to 4 days. The putrefaction and bloating phase can go anywhere from 4 to 10 days, and that's when the cadaver starts to swell up with because it gets filled with gas that are produced by those bacteria eating away at your body. And that's when you're also going to start to have the odor of decaying flesh. The next phase is black putrefaction. So this is where flesh is becoming kind of creamy, and the exposed body parts start to turn black. So the body cavities will start to collapse as those gases escape and find a way out, and fluids start to drain. So you'll see kind of a puddle of body fluids around the corpse. The odor becomes very strong in this phase. And this can last anywhere from 10 to 20 days. The next phase is butyric fermentation. This is where the cadaver starts to dry out. Some of the flesh remains at first, and it tends to have a very cheesy odor, and that's because of the butyric acid. And this can last anywhere from 20 to 50 days. And then the last phase is going to be dry decay. This is where the cadaver is almost dry. The rate of decay slows down, and this is also where mummification can occur. Not always, but it can occur. So this is anywhere from 50 to 365 days. The life cycle of insects is one of the things that we have to look at when we talk about forensic entomology. So we start with an egg, which will then metamorphose into a maggot or a larva, which will then turn into a pupa and then a winged adult. So here is the blowfly life cycle, okay? And blowflies are one of the very common ones that are found on corpses. So within 23 hours, we'll have eggs turn into a larva or a maggot, right? And then that maggot grows, okay? It's just showing it growing until it turns into a pupa at 130 hours, and then at 143 hours, it becomes a winged adult. So the higher the temperature, within limits, right? So if we put these in an oven at 400 degrees, they're not really going to be growing faster, right? But the higher the temperature within limits, the faster the growth. So we tend to see more insect activity quicker in warmer climates than we do, for example, in the Arctic. So variables that can affect metamorphosis. Habitat's another one. So fly species can vary geographically according to climate, season, and habitat. So the fly pictured on the left prefers shade. The one on the right prefers sunlit areas. Every area is going to have different insects. So forensic entomologists really have to be familiar with their area and the insects that are found in that area, and also the life cycle of those insects. So it's a pretty big job. So when we look at time of death, insects tend to arrive at a decomposing body in a very particular order. That order is known as the succession, and then they complete their life cycle based on the surrounding temperature. So by collecting and studying the types of insects found on a body and their metamorphic stage, a forensic entomologist can estimate the time of death. So we talked about Diptera, those were our flies, okay? So typically, first to arrive are going to be blowflies, and then the next would be flesh flies, and then house flies. So flies can arrive within a few minutes. They lay eggs that then hatch into maggots, and the maggots will feed on the soft, mushy body parts. And then more insects will come to feed on the body and then also on each other. All right, so the next section is Coleoptera, right, which those were our beetles. So here's the rough order of appearance. So they were the first one to arrive would be the rove beetle, followed by a sexton beetle, followed by clown beetles, dermestid beetles, and hide beetles. So some beetles feed on the corpse, some on maggots, and some on other beetles, right? Dermestid beetles are, kind of famous in the skull collecting world, which some of you know in that kind of area, because they'll use them to actually clean flesh off skulls. They can clean flesh off of bones, right? And they just leave behind dry bone. So other applications of forensic entomology would be looking at damage to structures. So for example, if we're looking at like termite damage, things like that, clothing and food stuff, location of wounds on a corpse. So insects tend to kind of congregate around openings, whether that be eyes, nose, mouth, anus, or a wound, right? It can also link suspects to the scene of a crime. They can be the source of contraband. You can look at the type of insects to trace vehicle movement. So if someone drove through Florida during love bug season and they found love bugs all in their radiator, that would definitely prove that they were here. And then the presence of drugs in a corpse can also be determined by looking at insects, because as they consume that corpse, they're also going to consume small amounts of those drugs if there's any left in the tissues. All right, so collection of evidence. So equipment you might use would be like a hand net, forceps, and a trowel, which is just a little shovel, right? A thermometer, because you need to know the temperature, and then vials, jars, and plastic bags. So hand net would be used to collect flying insects. You can also use tweezers to collect maggots and preserve them. You could collect insects, maggots, beetles, flies, etc., and put them in a specimen jar. And then you would take 3 or 4 soil samples from under the corpse as well, and all that is labeled. All right, and here's a case study, as they always throw one in at the end. So this is, I believe this one's in your book, but it's talking about a man who was exonerated of murder after 47 years based on data and photographs interpreted by Richard Merritt, who is a forensic entomologist at Michigan State University. All right, well, I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. I hope that this was helpful. Please make sure you get all your work done by Sunday. And if you need any help, as always, do not hesitate to reach out. I am here to help. Have a wonderful day.